We are seeing the scaffolding and infrastructure of the beast system being set up right now. We see it. CBDCs, the digital currency, is a one world currency. They're trying to form one world religion, one world government. I saw people were like literally holding each other by the shirt.
Do whatever the hell you want. You can speak out against God, indoctrinate kids, whether it's in schools, anywhere you go. You can't turn away from it.
And we definitely opened Pandora's box when we started to allow for certain things in society, and now we can never go back.
You have a message of unity for people of faith.
Whoever's listening to this, you're still here for a reason.
What's the meaning of life, brother?
Yeah, that's such a loaded question.
How were you able to stay so grounded in all of these insane times?
God doesn't need you to stand up for him.
They're battling for your mind. They're battling for your morals. And every day you wake up, you're going to war with all of these satanic forces.
You're right. The systems of the world know how to trigger people. They know how to create division. They want division. You're in Canada, so the leaders of your country and the leaders of our country, Australia, have sold themselves out to the World Economic Forum. Anyone that's seen that would say that there's no sense in that, but for some reason it happens. So don't think your leaders of the world are using common sense. A lot of them are using greed and selfishness to make their decisions.
If you were to deliver your last 30-second speech to the world, what would the last 30 seconds sound like? Hello and welcome back to Finding Freedom, the show that empowers you to become the freest version of yourself, one critical question at a time. My guest is one of the most influential transformational coaches in the world today. He's the owner and founder of addictedtosuccess.com, which has accumulated more than 300 million views worldwide. And he was offered 7 figures for it multiple times, but he refused to sell. He's collaborated with some of the most impactful personalities of our time, including Tony Robbins, Gary Vaynerchuk, Grant Cardone, and Matthew McConaughey, just to name a few. He's directly impacted the lives of more than 13,000 people over the past decade and a half through his tremendous work. He's single-handedly defeating the Monday morning blues, and he's your favorite coach's favorite coach. Joel Brown, thank you for joining Finding Freedom, and welcome to the show, brother.
Hey man, I love that edification.
Well, you deserve
to beat those Monday morning blues. That's awesome. Good stuff.
Absolutely. It's you have quite an impressive resume, and you deserve the accolades. So it's my pleasure, man. So first and foremost, it's great to see you. How are you doing right now? How is this phase of your life treating you?
Yeah, man. Right now it's expansion, focusing on growing and scaling, more impact. Also just reflecting a lot on what does it mean to have harmony in my life? There's a lot going on in the world, as you know, a lot of chaotic things and a lot of noise, a lot of propaganda, a lot of serious issues as well amongst it. So just looking at how do we harmonize? Because everything is touching everything. If you're suffering with your health, it affects your business, it affects your relationships, it affects your friendships, and so on. And so I'm very big on just making sure that I'm harmonizing and looking after myself across the board. I think as you get older, you start to notice these things. You can't get away with as much as you did when you were younger. So yeah, keeping fit, man, keeping healthy. Relationships awesome with my wife. Business is just, as you know, we got to constantly adapt. If we're online, I'm online. I have online businesses. So it's just really refining everything and just trying to outmaneuver the algorithms.
We all are, my brother. Trust me,
Yeah.
We all are. And I've witnessed your journey and your transformation. The growth you've achieved is quite remarkable. So, keep on doing your thing, brother. I am going to start off with a very light question, probably going to take us 5 seconds for the next question. What's the meaning of life, brother?
The meaning of life is to give glory to God, man. It's about expressing the fullness of what God is pouring into you to be a vessel for God. It's all God, man. Seriously, like whenever I try to make it about myself, I always just get in my own way. When I allow God to move through me, miracles happen, incredible things unfold before my eyes, and it's usually not for my own gain. It's for the purpose of impact in others' lives. And I think, we just need to get out of our own way.
Well, you summarized it pretty succinctly and pretty profoundly. And obviously, it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek type of thing to say. It's a quick type of thing. It obviously people have philosophized, people have different ideologies and schools of thought when it comes to the meaning of life. But yeah, people of faith do believe it is serving God and a higher purpose. Absolutely. And there we could talk a lot more about that for sure. But I want to briefly talk about, positive thinking practically. We don't have to take too much on this point, but lots of the time we hear about the power of positive thinking and mindset and mind over matter and all these things, and it's great in theory, but for people who have a million and one problems and have to pay bills and debts and children, all these things, and outside of just repeating affirmations and shouting them every morning to yourself in the mirror, what's a pragmatic, realistic way that we could take actionable steps and turn it from theory to practice?
Yeah, that's such a loaded question. I could say that, some people bash positive thinking. I think some people overly positive think, if you want to put it that way. They say just think it away and it will happen, which I'm not a believer in. I do think that there are people that spin in cycles and stay there in negative thinking, and that doesn't help either. So it's everything in harmony, man. There's a time to challenge yourself and say, hey, come on, you got to step it up. There's a time where you got to raise the standards. And there's a time where you get to give yourself some grace and say, you know what? I need to pour some love into me. I need to affirm, acknowledge where I have shown up and be graceful to yourself, because this world can be tough, man. It can. I'm not going to, say it's all sunshine and rainbows. And then there is beauty in the world too. So I would say sitting down and getting clear, like, okay, where do I get to show up? Maybe writing down some goals that you've been holding on to for a long time and questioning, how am I getting in my own way when it comes to this? What excuses am I making? Is there anyone that I get to have a conversation with that could support me with this, and just humble myself and not be so prideful, thinking I got to do everything myself? And being honest with, are you really putting in effort, or are you making excuses, right? I'm very big on supporting people in their potential. So I look at, okay, here's where you're not showing up, but also where do I get to sit down and be grateful at the end of the day? What am I grateful for? Because if I'm constantly thinking about what I'm not doing, and I'm constantly looking at the troubles in the world, and I'm constantly getting roped into the toxicity of social media and fake news, then it seems like doom and gloom, right? And so I start to absorb that thought into me, and I start to feel it in my body more and more, and it starts to become this like rumination cycle of everything's terrible, everything's a threat, nothing's good, and you're just not on your own team anymore, right? And look, man, as much as I know all this, as much as I've supported over 12,500 people worldwide and growing in transformation, I still have my times where I start to feel like I've been beaten down, with all the different things that can come in at once. For some people, it rains, it pours, right? It's just like, man, just give me a break, right? So yeah, you've got to be able to sit down and just equilibrate your perspective of the world. Yes, there's evil, but there's also good. Yes, there's bad, but there's also great, right? So just sitting down and working out, where am I at? Let's audit myself and let's see, if I was to be positive about this, how can I be grateful for who I am and what I've done? Where am I going? So if I was to write out a mini vision, here's what I desire to achieve. You could write a few goals and then write down I have, or I am, as in present tense. So you're training your subconscious to hold and retain that this is possible now, not waiting for it to come. And then writing because as a positive justification on the back end, to train and show your subconscious there's a mini game plan that's in place in order for you to be able to embody that and bring that into your life, right? But a lot of people don't do that. They sit around, they look on social, they get worried about all the things that are happening. I spend 5% of the time looking at the events and the things that are going on. I go, okay, that's interesting. I like to be informed. But then I spend 95% of my time in assertiveness and proactivity and productivity, to be able to move the chess pieces and be smart about things, right? This isn't the time to retract and turtle in. It's time to expand and to step into as much abundance and productivity as possible.
That's some great wisdom, and I believe you're exactly right. And it's a matter of taking a proactive approach rather than constantly reacting. And there's a lot of power in that.
Yes, you're right.
Switching gears quite a little bit and moving on to something that took place over the past few years. we're still feeling the aftermath of 2020 in many different ways. I believe, in my opinion, 2020 was the year of division. It divided people in many different ways, vaxxed against unvaxxed, masked against unmasked. It divided own families, societies, many divisions we've witnessed. Also, it was the largest divide of wealth we've seen in recorded human history. And in addition to all of that, it divided truth from falsehood. And it made many people, it gave them a lot of clarity. And there was a bit of a paradigm shift and an awakening of some kind where people started seeing reality for what it really is. And you seem to be one of these voices that was extremely grounded. You were even guiding people in different methods, whether it's detox protocols, or just a matter of telling them to remain grounded, not to be fazed by all of the noise and the distraction, the manipulation, like you said, the propaganda. So how were you able to stay so grounded in all of these, insane times? And how were you able to remain, with such unwavering faith? And what's your perspective over the whole past few years, and what type of backlash did you receive from all of that?
Oh yeah. Well, look, it kicked off publicly or worldwide, I would say, around March 2020. I remember I was running a retreat in Marrakesh in Morocco when they first announced it, and I remember the NBA ended up stopping, and everyone freaked out and thought it was the end of the world. And so, I was prepared to stay in a Riyadh. I was sending everybody home that was at the retreat. We had a lot of like mums there that were all freaking out. They wanted to go back to their kids. And I went down to the airport in Morocco, and I saw people were like literally holding each other by their shirts, like yelling and screaming each other's face and pushing and cutting lines to get home. Very quickly, I noticed how people can be very reactive when they're in fear. And that's what I had a good snapshot of quite early. So I was like, wait, everyone's in so much fear, but they don't know yet. And I'm like, this could be a thing that could be easily propagated over people so they could be easily manipulated, right? And so anyway, sure enough, I went back. I couldn't get back to Bali, Indonesia at the time because they had shut the borders, but I was able to make it back to Australia, which is where I was born. So I got to Australia. My mate has an awesome house in Gold Coast. He's like, come and stay for a month. It'll probably just be a month. They shut down everything.
2 weeks to flatten the curve.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. And yeah, man, I started speaking about it on social. I started sharing like, hey guys, this doesn't add up. I bet they're probably going to bring a vaccine out for this. Like I started to call things before it was happening. You called
it before it happened.
Yeah. And I had so many people reach out to me and say, oh, you're insensitive. And I wasn't being rude at all. I wasn't being insensitive. I was just like asking questions and saying something doesn't add up. What do you guys think? And I was presenting things because I was like, this isn't right. I don't like people getting bullied or taken advantage of. It was something I personally experienced when I was in high school. And I just don't like bullies, bro. I don't like injustice. And I felt it in everything in my core. Like every alarm in my body was going off that this was dictatorial. It was authoritarian. It was manipulative. It was narcissistic. I could see it. And when I started seeing that Big Pharma was just banking hard and the corporations were taking like just extracting money from everywhere else and small businesses and were shutting down and people losing their jobs, I went, okay, I can see what's happening here. I picked it up pretty early. And it was interesting to sort of start seeing other people speaking about it maybe a few months later, like Andrew Tate. I don't know how long he was talking about it. But yeah, just a few of my informed friends at the time that were, I wouldn't say conspiracy theorists, but like just aware that things don't just happen out of nowhere for no reason, that a lot of things in this world, they do have a plan behind them because, some uncanny things can happen from time to time, but not that much, right? Like there's a lot of orchestration that's happening. And I studied a lot of history, man. I was big on studying the collapse of Rome and studying Napoleon Bonaparte and studying, in the scriptures as well, the fall of Babylon, the fall of Mesopotamia, the fall of Medo-Persia, like all of these things. It's just history repeating itself. And I can see sort of where we're heading now because Rome never was like destroyed by one nation. They collapsed by immorality, right? They rotted from within. It was moral decay. And that's what we're seeing now is we're seeing this this weakening of the foundations and fabric of society, and we're seeing manipulation and advantage being taken, and the greed of not just corporations, but the beast system that we're all a part of is just like a bunch of leeches extracting from as many people as possible. So yeah, these are terrible things. They do go on. But by the grace of God, whoever's listening to this, you're still here for a reason. It's not over. I believe as a Christian, Christ has already won. Like, we don't have to worry about these things. We're already informed through prophecy of what's happening. And we get to, do the best that we can to be there, to be supportive and nurturing for others, and mindful, and try to sort of understand where people are coming from. Sometimes people do rub me the wrong way, but I'm practicing to just listen and ask questions rather than try and defend, because defensiveness is part of the beast system and way.
Well, I mean, that's pretty remarkable what you said. I mean, and there's a lot of layers to unpack, but I mean, it's not easy to, especially when people, come at you in a certain way, and to have that grace and to be able to absorb it, and to be able to return it with kindness or whatever the case may be. But
Arrows in the back, homie. Arrows in the back, man. You got to get that rhino skin. Sometimes it just happens, and you got to weigh up: is it worth it? It's usually it's not.
I totally feel you, man. And speaking of Christ, you just mentioned Christ, and I did want to ask you, we're just a couple of weeks removed from the charades that happened for, the France Olympics, which are the woke Olympics right now. And they are desecrating a holy symbol and making fun of the Last Supper, or, making a mockery of it in some way, shape, or form. And right now we're seeing in front of our eyes all of these religious and sacred symbols desecrated, and under the guise of free speech, and you're able to do whatever the hell you want. You can speak out against God. You can indoctrinate kids to do all of these ridiculous things. But if you go slightly against the mainstream narrative, the agenda that they have, you're going to be reprimanded beyond belief. And so all of this, they seem to have an obsession with all of this wokeness and this ideology that they're forcing down children's throats, whether it's in schools, anywhere you go, you can't turn away from it. So what is this obsession that they have? I'd love to know, what are your thoughts about that whole charades that happened, and what's really going on with this sick agenda that they have going on?
Well, okay, let's unpack this. I'll do my best that I can with the time we have. There's so many layers to this, right? It's not just one thing, and it's a big mixed pot, and we definitely opened Pandora's box when we started to allow for certain things in society, and now we can never go back, right? Look, you were talking about the Last Supper and how people were slamming that or like ripping it off and basically slapping Christianity in the face. Christ has been dissed and spat on and shamed since he was here, since he walked the earth. Like, they spat on him, ripped his beard, rib cage showing from the lashings, carrying his cross, and he still said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know." He rose above all of it. He could see beyond. He saw his mission. He saw kingdom. And from the beginning of time, there's always been a spiritual war that has been waged. And so God has his kingdom, right, which is of truth and love and liberty. And then you have Satan, his methods and his kingdom, as we can see. We see it everywhere now. Like, it's so obvious that there is evil playing out, right? Satan means the adversary, the enemy. That's what Satan means. Devil is doer of evil, right? And we see it. And so I think that this, from a spiritual perspective, Satan is not so obvious. He's not like the devil with the red horns. He's been around from the beginning of time, and he understands human behavior quite well. He's actually very wise beyond our years. And so we can be easily fooled and triggered by his ways. And I think it's part of a spiritual manipulation to trigger as many people that haven't chosen to be with God, that even those that have chosen to be with God are being triggered because they are taking offense to it. And I ultimately think, like, you can't offend God. You can't mock God, ultimately. Like, you can't. He's the creator of the heavens and the universe. We are, like, retarded and stupid to think that we can just get away with all these, like, crazy things. And I don't believe in a punishing God that's a dictator or authoritarian. That's not my perspective and understanding of God's character. I think it's shameful and embarrassing to mock our creator. Like how ignorant and arrogant to mock the person that actually brought you from infinite into finite time to live a purpose here that gives you an opportunity to be in the infinite again. And we just mock him and laugh at him. So if anything, I feel sorry for the people that are mocking him, because it's such a stupid decision to reject your creator, right? So that's how I view it. I can see why Christians get triggered, but they've been doing this to Christians. They've been doing it to anyone that's a believer of God and faith for like thousands of years, man. It's nothing new. I think so we talked about spiritual there. Then we talk about kingdoms. Satan has his beast system, which is a kingdom of his domain. We are seeing the scaffolding and infrastructure of the beast system being set up right now. We see it. CBDCs, the digital currency, is a one world currency. They're trying to form one world religions. They're trying to form one world governments. Like, this is all the Tower of Babel. It's repeating again. It's man trying to be God themselves and trying to do governments and kingdoms without God. And ultimately, when we try to do it without God, by default, we start to move towards Satan's ways and methods, which is manipulation and deception and lies, right? So I think because people do have sin in their heart, if you want to call sin, because there's like, people have a thing about sin. They don't like it because hearing the name, it sort of makes them feel shame. The way I see sin is it's a violation of purpose. Whenever we do it, it takes us away from who God originally designed us to be. And it's a shame because we're not living in the fulfillment and the fullness of our potential. We keep playing outside of it. And that sucks for us, right? So yeah, I think people have that sin in their heart. You and I have it. Everyone does. No one is perfect. The only person that's perfect was Christ. He walked this earth and walked in perfection and rose again. We can't do that. That can only come from God, right? That's why Satan mocks him. That's why the world rejects him often, because it's so offensive, because the truth hurts, right? And so ultimately, at the end of the day, what I see that because we do have that sin in our heart, we are by nature drawn to lies and deception. We're drawn to selfishness. We're drawn to the lusts of the heart and the lusts of the flesh. And so anyone that hasn't chosen to be washed in that with God and be renewed each day and to lean on God to ask him to renew them and bring him back to their design, they'll completely reject it and think nothing is wrong with it. And again, it's totally unfortunate for someone that decides to live like that. I truly believe that if you have a child, right, and you give birth, or your partner gives birth to a child, you want to see that child do the best that it can in this world. You don't want it to get hurt. You don't want it to walk down the wrong path. You love it and you care for it. But ultimately, one day, you're just going to have to let your child do its thing. And that's exactly what's happening with us and God. God would love for us to walk in our fullness and our design. But often we are selfish children that keep slapping him in the face and rejecting him. And it's just really immature.
Wow, man, you have a lot of wisdom. You have a lot
in there. There's so much more in there, but try my best.
People are in need of guidance. We're severely misguided. All of us are misguided to different degrees. But I mean, in what happened and the mockery of all of these sacred religious symbols, some people believe that we should be furious. Some people, maybe like yourself, subscribe to a different camp where you should be, more tolerant. I'm very careful with these words because they've demolished a lot of these words with tolerance and, all of these different words that they want to use as euphemisms. But I mean, I believe that in moments like these, not only should Christians, take a stance, but I believe there's a message of unity and it's an opportunity to unite between people of faith, regardless of what you want to call your belief system. If you do believe, you believe in God, you believe in a true calling, and you're a person of faith, you should, whether it's be angry, whether it's take a stance, a firm stance, and because there are limits to these types of things, and a reaction is demanded in these types of. So, do you have a message of unity for people of faith in times like these?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, Jesus said that you will be persecuted for my name's sake. Like he already warned us about this, right? Because it is triggering, right? He stood in the face of the religious and called them out. He said to the Pharisees and Sadducees, "You are like whitewashed tombs." You know what that means? It means that you look good on the outside with all your coats and all your fancy rituals, but you're dead on the inside. That's what it means. And that's very triggering for someone to say that to a Pharisee or a Sadducee in those times. Like, no wonder why they wanted to hang him on the cross. But he was speaking truth. So there's this like really high respect. I think most people across the board, they don't really have anything bad to say about Jesus, right? They're like, yeah, he did some pretty amazing things. I don't really have anything bad to say about the guy. So I think a lot of Christians forget that, right? And I think a lot of people of faith forget the power of God, that God doesn't need you to stand up for him. What God is calling you to is to love one another. Like that is harder. To me, that's harder to love someone, even when they're screaming in my face and we have a different, perspective of the world. It is very hard. I want to be right. There's a selfishness in me that wants to be right. But in trying to be right, sometimes we lose that person. We lose the opportunity to connect with that person because being right's more important than connecting. And like, it took me a long time to realize that, man. I study Christian apologetics. I can debate with different belief systems, and I studied theology to a degree for a couple of years. And like, I got on my high horse for a while, because I was like, no, I know the right answer, and it's in this verse, and it's this and that, and here's the logical consistency and empirical evidence and experiential relevance, and I can go into all these different frames of belief systems and that. But it's not helpful for somebody that has a heart struggle with their character, with where they're wrestling with like the injustice of the world. You're not going to be able to just logically take someone there. They feel something different. And a lot of the time when I find that people are rejecting God or they're mocking, it's usually that they've had a really terrible experience with somebody of faith. They've felt shamed, rejected, judged. And like, I've been a judgmental person, man. I've shamed people. I know the damage of shame because I've worked with thousands of people, over 12,000 in my life through coaching, and I see the effects of shame and guilt. And I would hate to think that on the receiving end of that, people are going into absolute turmoil in life. And just because somebody is showing up in that way doesn't mean we have to lower ourselves to that level and behave in that way. That's exactly what Satan wants. He wants more people in his beast system. And he has, like, if you imagine like an email funnel system, he doesn't care if it's left or right. Like, whatever one is going to be acting in beastly ways and not loving their neighbor, he's funneling both of them into his system at the end of the day, because we move further away from God when we are not in truth and love and liberty. And truth doesn't always mean that self-righteousness and we have all the answers. Truth could be that I'm laying myself down before God and saying, I'm going to humble myself and deny myself and not have to have this self-righteousness in order to be somebody in this world. And that's tough, man. It requires maturity and it requires emotional intelligence. And it also just requires humbling yourself and saying to God, use me as a vessel, man. I don't know all the answers. I'll keep learning. Teach me how to love people even when they hate me. That's like the ultimate request from God that I think God ultimately probably really loves to hear. It's like, finally, my child wants to know how to be the bigger person.
I think that's one of the hardest traits to master, returning hatred with love. It's quite a skill. And like you said, it requires a lot of maturity, a lot of growth, a lot of wisdom. And it's a process. You don't get there overnight. And, it's definitely a time consuming and an experience inducing task. But I do want to ask you in terms of, I believe there's a lot of division going on in the world, and that's exactly what all of these systems are put in place to do. And on the outside, it's like they're designed for a certain purpose, to build you up, to protect you. And on the other hand, we're seeing all of the opposite happen in front of our eyes day by day. And I believe there's absolutely enough division going on. And it is the devil versus God, if you want to call it that, truth versus evil. And it is a battle because they're battling for your mind. They're battling for your morals. And every day you wake up, you're going to war with all of these satanic forces. And I don't think anyone.
Think about this, bro. Think about this. So Satan runs his methods of the world through selfishness. Anyone in the world that has got this survival of the fittest mindset, selfish mindset, they are by nature already a part of that system, whether you like it or not. If God is selfless and he's saying love one another, then you're in his system and you're in his ways and methods. But you're right. The systems of the world know how to trigger people. They know how to create division. They want division because, as you've heard millions of times, a house that is divided will be conquered, right? Like, we know that. And so, yeah, the fabric of reality is being torn, man. It's being tattered and torn, and people are falling for it. It's really sad, man. Like, I see videos pop up about, Palestine and Gaza and what happened initially in Israel. And I also see what's happening right now. I don't know if you saw what's happened, like, I think it's today or yesterday, was in Bangladesh. There's all these Hindus that are getting slaughtered right now. Like, it's, a terrorist attack and apparently from a Muslim group. But like, the thing is, like, I got Muslim friends and they're amazing. And like, for me to say all Muslims are this or all Christians are that or all Hindus are, it's not fair, man. It's not right, And so we got to be careful of not falling for a general blanket statement because the system is trying to feed us a lie, right? Yeah. So,
and I was just watching an interview today, and it was discussed how basically we could go back in history and even as recently as 20 years ago, and how there's a lot of hatred that was manipulated and it was fabricated towards certain ideologies, and there is a benefit to people in charge to create divisions amongst the populace. And like you said, you can't judge an entire ideology based on the actions of a few, or we could go into that conversation in depth. But yeah, absolutely, you have to rise above all of the insignificant noise that you're hearing. So
it's almost like you got to do the opposite of what the world is trying to encourage everybody to do.
Pretty much, that's what I learned to do.
Like, Jesus literally did the opposite. Like, he flipped everything on its head. He was inverting his kingdom, inverted the systems of the world. That's how he overcame it. That's how he broke the matrix and created the protocol to come out of the matrix by inverting it and doing the opposite of what everyone expected him to do. It's pretty much.
And it's like, if you follow most of the people, they're going to guide you astray. You shouldn't necessarily just follow whatever the masses are doing. We've seen how unequivocally wrong most people can be. And I've learned to see most of what the media says is absolute nonsense. So I've learned to almost completely invert whatever they tell me to do and reach my own conclusions and do my own research, because you can't just be willfully blind. And I believe there are many. I talked about how I believe there's many pandemics ongoing. I believe one of the pandemics is the pandemic of blind compliance or willful ignorance, and there's a pandemic of the vaccine injured that we're facing right now. And you alluded a little bit to some of the things that we might see in the next few years, whether it's CBDCs. I don't know if you want to touch upon that briefly, if you have any predictions. I mean, you were right in the past.
Again, man, it's just, Satan has a funneled system, like a email funnel system, and he's just trying to funnel everybody into one world order. Whatever that looks like, it's a unified, and I do think that people that are in like the new age, like great awakening space, you need to be really careful of that, because Satan plays there too. And when people think they're breaking the veil and they become awakened and they're seeing the light, that's exactly where Satan wants to manipulate and fool them, because ultimately we can't do it without God. It's not going to come from our own efforts. We can all make a bit of a difference in like how God's co-creating with us, right, in real time. But ultimately, the undertaking that will take place at the end of times and last days is only going to come from God yielding his power and authority and his love over the world and bringing his truth to the lies and the shadows and deceptions. And I think if you want to have a snapshot of the future, Christ already won, man. It says like at the end of, we did a whole entire breakdown on the book of Revelation on my podcast, The Unknown God. It's insane. We did every single chapter, and people love it. Daniel and Revelation, we did prophecy on all of it, right? And we talked about the mark of the beast, and we talked about you cannot buy and sell. We talked about Babel and AI and everything. People freaked out about AI, but people were freaked out about the internet 15, 20, maybe 30 years ago. And then now it's just part of our society. AI is going to be part of our society. But the bigger question is, what are we using that's going to funnel all of us into a one set of control system? And that's ultimately where the beast system starts to yield more power and authority over us. But I just say, if you have God as your authority over all of it, then that's going to be the best place for you to have your protection in those times. Is it going to be easy? No, we're warned that times can be tough. But I think for now, diversify, pivot, understand there's a little bit of chess being played. Be smart about where you're located. Be smart about, how you're looking after your health. Be smart about your decisions. Use critical thinking. Look up things on multiple sources and cross-reference things. Use logical consistency. Look for empirical evidence. Like, don't just accept something for what it is. Don't get fooled into political games. Right? All of these things are pretty common sense at this point. We've had to learn to adapt and actually approach times like this because of what happened 4 years ago during the pandemic.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, common sense is not that common, but hopefully it's going to make a comeback.
You're in Canada. You're in Canada, so the leaders of your country and the leaders of our country, Australia, have sold themselves out to the World Economic Forum, and anyone that's seen that would say that there's no sense in that, but for some reason it happens. So don't think your leaders of the world are using common sense. A lot of them are using greed and selfishness to make their decisions. And so you got to be, a person that is sufficient, but also trust God in the process to have that harmonization in your life.
Absolutely. I could not agree more, my brother. I do want to ask you, Joel, what is your definition of freedom? And do you believe you've achieved your version of freedom?
Look, man, there's a few versions of freedom. There's spiritually free, physically free, and financially free, right? Financially free to me is it's not about how much money you make, it's how you make your money. Can you go to bed at night feeling proud about how you make your money and know that what you're doing is it's having a positive impact in the world and you feel good about it? Because anyone can make a lot of money lying to people and ripping them off. Spiritually free is knowing that God has my soul. It doesn't go with anybody else. You can destroy my body, but you can't take my soul. And physically free is like, are you living where you want to live? Are you able to travel? Are you able to do your thing? Are you in nature when you want to be in nature? Like, are you supporting yourself to be able to live where you get to live? And maybe if you're listening right now, you might not have all three things just yet, but that's something that you get to work on over the weeks, months, years. The more you set those things up, when things get crazy, your web of resilience is much stronger. So it's harder for the winds of the chaos of the world to blow you because you're setting up your foundation strong.
Fair enough. I'm going to plagiarize the last question from one of your interviews, or from several of your interviews, and if you were to deliver your last 30-second speech to the world, what would the last 30 seconds sound like?
Jesus loves you. He died on the cross for you. He did that not just for some sort of, like, people think it's a penalty. It's not a penalty that needed to be paid. It was that he wanted to win the love and trust of us. When he said that he can give us eternal life, that God has made that possible beyond this world, that how would we trust him unless he showed us that he could do it himself, that he could physically, bodily rise from the grave? And to do it in a way where he didn't let the systems of the world take him down, that he saw his mission through. A lot of people like following people like a Tony Robbins or a Gary Vaynerchuk, or The Rock or Oprah. Jesus is way better and way more influential than all of those guys in the impact he's made. And
all of these men and women are fallible.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's just good. Yeah, I would say he loves you. He's got a plan for you. He is the safety boat on a sinking ship, right? Like, why not choose it? Why would you go down with the ship? Choose him, choose that way, come out of the matrix and come into a better life, knowing that you've got a plan for the future and not living in fear.
That's awesome, my brother. Lastly, is there anything you want to plug? We're going to put your links and everything, but is there any specific
Yeah.
thing you wanted to
Yeah, you
plug?
could go to Addicted to Success podcast. It's Addicted, the number 2 Success podcast. You can hit me up at I am Joel Brown, JoelBrown, on Instagram, and reach out to me. DM me if you got questions or want to jam, want to hang out. Cool. Hit me
We're
up.
definitely going to leave those links, and people who can get in touch with you. And man, hats off to you for everything you've built. You deserve all the success, and you're doing an awesome job, man. Don't ever stop. God bless you. I do understand. Yeah, you got to go. So hopefully we can connect soon.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you, man. God bless. Thank you for
Awesome.
everyone that's listening right now, and keep believing. Trust and believe. Don't lose faith.